store. My name is Casey. I am the assistant manager of branch stores here, where we host a range of in-store events along with partnered events, trips, and classes. So a few quick housekeeping things before we get started. If you have your cell phone on you, we ask that you please silence it or turn it off. That way we don't disrupt the event. And when it comes to the Q&A portion of the evening, we'll be passing a microphone around. And if you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll come to you with the mic. That way everybody can hear you. All right. Tonight I am delighted to welcome Cal Hoffman, celebrating the release of his new novel, Easy to Slip. Cal Hoffman is a writer, educator, and actor. He graduated from Catholic University and attended Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art in London and the MFA Fiction Writing Program at Columbia University. He has taught English and creative writing to children of immigrants, private school students, and young people in foster care. As an actor, he has performed in regional theater across the country and starred in the acclaimed New York revival of Jules Feiffer's Elliot Loves. Cal lives with his wife Victoria and their son Harry in Washington, D.C. Hoffman will be in conversation with Maria Goyanes, the artistic director of Woolly Mammoth Theater Company. Prior to joining Woolly, she served as the director of producing at the Public Theater. Maria is a first-generation Latinx American, born to parents who immigrated from the Dominican Republic and Spain, and she earned her Bachelor of Arts in 2001 from Brown University. So please join me in welcoming Cal Hoffman and Maria Goyanes.
Yeah, you want to?
Hello?
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 Yeah.
Okay. Monday, September 2nd, Labor Day, 1968, Washington, D.C.
Oh, it's on. You just have to be close.
It's on? Okay. Oh, now it's good. Okay.
You have a nice. Perfect.
Monday, September 2nd, Labor Day, 1968, Washington, D.C. My grandparents came to visit. Bobby Kennedy had been shot. Sirhan got everyone trying to change America fired. Resurrection City closed 2 weeks later. There was nowhere special I could take Grandpa Harry and Grandma Lil. Watching the convention, kids throwing fruit, beaten with billy clubs by cops, while Georgia delegate Julian Bond addresses all the suits sitting safe inside the hall. Dad notes it's remarkable Bond holds attention given the mayhem outside. He's only 33 years old. Dad notes he's black, most people inside and outside the convention being white. Testimony to the brilliance of what Bond's saying. This provokes Grandpa into asking why Dad's still working for peanuts here in Washington.
What? Mom says, for perhaps the first time in her life.
Got here a year ago, Dad says.
Our first house, Mom adds. 28,000, 2 months ago. You're sitting in it.
Working for peanuts, Ronnie? Harry can be obstinate. I still don't understand. Dad slaves all week over statistics and policy papers in his cramped office in the Wilbur J. Cohen Federal Building, 330 Independence Avenue Southwest. Do I even begin to comprehend what he does? Dad raises his eyebrows, and in the ambiguity of the moment, I decide he blames me for every abrasive word afflicting our family, at least this past week. We drive back to our new house in silence. I'm never certain where Dad's peak is directed. Perhaps I imagined being included so well. Yet our cherished family has fractured beyond repair. Saturday, March 15th, 1969, West 9th Street, New York City. That night we go out to eat, Danny, Stephanie, Katie, and I. We go to a favorite place, Le Steak, nestled in the ground floor of a brownstone on a street like West 11th. I've been 2 previous occasions with Steph, Danny, and my folks. Tonight we arrived just after 6. The place is already packed.
pre-theater, the maitre d' informs my aunt. But for you, Mrs. Kovner, we always have a table.
We slide into a comfy booth. The maitre d' brings a booster chair and sets Katie up in the aisle. Stephanie asks for macaroni and cheese and spring water.
What would you like? The maitre d' asks my uncle.
The usual. Danny's focusing on a spot somewhere near the ceiling. Angels we've heard on high, perhaps, or some meddlesome thought he simply can't shake.
Au pauvre, medium rare, frisée, and lardons for both of us, and I'll have the salmon. Cook it very rare, please, my aunt says. Sam?
Trying to choose, but I've barely looked. It's confusing just starting to study a menu. 5 or 6 steaks listed, ribs, sirloin, chop, filet mignon, au pauvre, porterhouse, then lamb chops, calf's liver, salads, appetizers, desserts, all in regally cursive letters that fill a single page.
Sam?
Stephanie's asking, yet I'm blanking.
Porterhouse, medium rare, she says.
I love porterhouse. Mom gets it at Giant. Not too expensive here in the city, I hope. Stephanie's smiling at me, not the hard critiquing smile I imagine Gwen in the arrangement flashes, bait and switch during company meetings. No, my aunt smiles sweetly, hinting admiration, rumors of awe. Her smile feels positively euphoric. Did you call about the stairs? Danny asks, seizing the moment.
They'll have an estimate next Wednesday.
I want them starting next week.
They'll get in Thursday or Friday.
Get them shoot an estimate Monday, start the house Wednesday. Push them AM Wednesday.
I don't know, my aunt says.
You don't know? How much the door gonna be?
It curves around, 8,000.
For a door?
It's Brazilian cherry.
Best woods from Africa. You want cherry? Aunt Stephanie takes a pamphlet from her purse, leafs through it a quarter minute or so.
Tasmanian oak, she suggests.
Tasmanian? Sounds funny, but oak's good.
Walnut? African walnut?
What else is there?
Rosewood, lacewood, zebrawood, yellow heart, purple heart.
Wait, it's a townhouse. Wood.
Honey, mahogany. All right, African mahogany, Brazilian cypress, cherry.
We don't want Brazilian, my uncle says.
Why not?
Teak. They got teak? Stephanie looks down at the pamphlet.
Yeah, it looks like they got teak.
For a second, I hear the chattering at all the other tables. Don't want it, my uncle says. Everyone gets teak. My aunt's still looking down, yet I think she's done searching the pamphlet. Rosewood, Danny says. Ask for the rosewood.
All right, she says.
Just then the waiter arrives, food carrier in tow. We're served. The meal's extraordinarily delicious. My aunt orders creme brulee for dessert, which she shares with Katie. I get vanilla ice cream with hot fudge sauce, which I eat all by myself. My uncle's dieting for his movie part. Old people are thin, he explains. We get outside, it's dark already. My uncle holds Katie, notices her eyes closing, and so hands her to Aunt Stephanie, then proceeds to unfold the stroller. Stephanie hugs Katie close, then gingerly places her in the stroller. My uncle suggests we all go for a walk, and we head east on 9th until we hit 5th Avenue and then Broadway. We're crossing 3rd Avenue when my aunt breaks the inscrutable silence.
Let's go to Viniero's, she says.
We tourists? Danny asks.
Ronnie?
Stephanie says, seemingly mistaking me for Dad.
Your father, she adds. He talked to Sheila like this?
Sometimes, I say.
Well.
You can hardly hear Steffi sometimes. Well, what? Danny asks, barreling ahead with the stroller. Can't hardly hear him sometimes as well.
I feel sorry for your brother, my aunt says, hustling to catch up for Joshua.
Don't have to, I say. I'm a younger brother, my uncle announces, Ronnie's younger brother. We finally caught up to him. Ronnie's got smarts, always did, always has.
So what's wrong with pastry? Asks my aunt.
Kataifi and baklava, Danny replies. I love baklava, I say, finally getting a word in edgewise. That's all we need, my uncle seems to repeat.
Danny knows all the places, Stephanie concludes.
Then my uncle starts to whistle, vibrating the entire lower rack of his teeth. It's a familiar Danny sound. We walk east, first crossing 2nd and then 1st Avenue. There's few people on the street, the buildings looking more forlorn and unkempt the farther east we go. I see cracks in the window glass, names scrawled on a stucco wall. Street lights burned out, a siren popping through the traffic's rumble. We're almost at Avenue A when my uncle suddenly stops. Just before the corner, Danny studies the doors, of all the ghostly buildings. Wasn't it Avenue A, he asks.
Think we're on the wrong block, Stephanie says.
Avenue A, my uncle insists.
It was Avenue A, just before Avenue A, my aunt adds. But it's on 10th Street.
10th Street?
Old, but you're not that old.
Ain't failing me yet, my uncle says, turning to me. Keep your noggin, he adds, upward inflected with barely veiled threat, tapping forefinger to temple. Keep your beads, kid. We head up Avenue A one block till we get to 10th Street. And there, north side of the block, 4 buildings in, I see a dim light, a single bulb that emanates clear and distinct, imbuing this shop with the aura of a genuine miracle. The soot and the dirt of years accumulate around a sign designating this basement-level enterprise. Darkness down the block, impossible to make out the letters precisely. Let's see, is he home? Danny asks, picking up the stroller and carrying it down the stairs, like it's a foregone conclusion someone's here. So my aunt follows, leaving me on the sidewalk, standing apart for the moment. My uncle pushes a buzzer, waiting half a minute until someone opens the door and he can lift the stroller through, Stephanie following. The someone looks up. I'm still here, up on the concrete. You with them? He asks. I'm not against them. I'm not intending a joke, but the man cracks a smile and just keeps looking at me. So I walk down the stairs. Inside there's a wood counter, no glass anywhere. Nothing is displayed in plain sight like in most retail. It's the strangest store ever, and they're selling pastries here. Must be the man can't afford glass. Put the place together all by himself, turned a basement apartment into his bakery and store. We need baklava, my friend, Danny says. Kataifi and baklava. The man reaches beneath the counter, slides open a door, and takes out a tray of phyllo. Incisions crisscross diagonally, form diamonds that glisten honey and smell of walnuts and spice, with not a single piece missing. It's in back, the man says. The kataifi, I'll get it. He goes back, returning a moment later with a similar tray, again phyllo, yet containing a different filling. The man sets this tray next to the baklava, takes out a pen, and starts to add numbers on scratch paper. Another, my uncle says. Sorry, I forgot. 2 trays baklava we need. The man looks up, flashing such terrifying seriousness. I cannot be mistaken. This soft-spoken baker and storekeeper, he's experienced unspeakable tragedy in his life. Its memory is so fully alive, the risk of survival, the sheer cost of living each day within this trauma is the only thing that matters for him. He places each tray in a box, ties each box with dime store string, with concentration so extraordinary, it's as if he's handing over boxes or bars of Fort Knox gold. He gently presents the 3 boxes, one by one, to my uncle. I thank you, the man says. I can't help but think of Dad, and I feel shame. Not ashamed for any specific thought. I'm deeply ashamed for my father. I discover in absence that I believe him sorely limited by just such traumatic contradictions, the keen texture of undeniably conflicting memories. My father, once so intimate with me, isolated now so painfully, like this enigmatic baker.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I feel so lucky to be here because I got to read this book before a lot of people. And it is so deep and raw and true and funny and lonely and rich and so many different things. And so I'm really just very excited to be here and just being able to chat with you a bit. I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about the narrative and structuring the narrative and what did you do? How did you go about doing that?
Well, I always start anything I write by asking myself the hardest question I can imagine. And if you ask a really hard question, one that you might never be able to answer, seeking to answer it will guide what you write, sentence by sentence, page by page, chapter by chapter. And it will also inherently root you in that intention. And then free you to write whatever comes to your mind. Whatever comes to your mind will have some intrinsic unity to it without being pre-planned. So I have that question. I sit down and I write whatever comes to mind unbidden. And I try to delve as much as I can into thoughts I haven't been previously aware of. And of course, the question itself doesn't just come from nowhere. It comes from a set of conditions, or in a play, you would say, given circumstances. So with this book, I wanted to share my experience at Columbia University starting in late February 1976. And I actually have the midterm that I turned in right before the first sentence in the book, in chapter 1. So I guess it was February 28th, Saturday night. And the first sentence, Sam wakes up and he realizes he's lying on the floor of the a lecture hall in School of International Affairs, and he doesn't know how he got there, why he's passed out. He remembers having dropped off this midterm to his professor's office. Hears the trucks on Amsterdam Avenue. He sees the truck light going across the wall. And he remembers, he goes to a memory of cutting his foot on a sprinkler when he was 5, crashing his Stingray bicycle when he was 10 on 42nd Place and splitting his forehead and needing 4 or 5 stitches. Then he goes back to his dorm, to John J. Hall, and as he's going up in the elevator, he sees writing etched into the metal of the panel and scrawled on the plastic wall. And he imagines, he interprets what he sees as being written about him. He walks out into the hall. He walks past open door, one of the party rooms on the 1975 John J. Hall, and they invite him in, and he imagines they're hooting and catcalling and calling him names, and he believes this narrative feels like it's 100% rational and real. But somehow maybe it's because he's feeling bad. He knows that he's going crazy. So he's already trying to figure out, well, if you know you're going crazy, how do you get well? How do you find yourself out of a breakdown? And he's taking 4 junior level English courses. I got an A on that midterm that I had turned in. He's doing well in all of them, and I interestingly have all my notebooks from that entire spring, and they're filled with fascinating notes. And yet, February 28th, when Easy to Slip begins. This was the experience I have really in its first couple pages of chapter 1. And from there on, I just seek to answer that question. And for the next 176 pages and 36 hours, Sam he's in his dorm, and then he ends up walking through New York. He walks all the way down to the Battery, and then all the way up to the East Side and across town, and he's sorry, is that okay? So I'm getting ahead a little bit because I wanted to share one thing. I wanted to show the experience in a very close, specific way. So what actually happens in his mind is he hears people putting him down and hooting at him. He sees this writing. He interprets it as specifically messages written to him. And he wonders, well, why do they have, what did I do wrong? And he's on an all-male junior floor, all male. Most of the kids are juniors. I was a freshman. I was there a year early, so I had turned 18 while I was there. It was my senior year of high school, technically. But I'd had a girlfriend my first month or month and a half that one of the junior English majors on the floor ended up dating a month and a half, 2 months later. And so I thought that perhaps they were envious or upset about that. Maybe that was the reason. That got me angry, but I didn't feel I deserved to have any anger about it or any feelings about it. So the thing that I did was I projected all the anger out onto other people, which made the voices and the hallucinations get worse. So it was like a terribly hellish cycle. Finally, it got so intense that I had to leave the floor. That's the first section in the book, and there's a lot of other things because he seeks to understand what happens in terms of a young woman he's just gone out with, who he wants to see again. So he's thinking about his recent relationships and trying to see maybe that's what's going on. But he's finally, before dawn, he finds himself under the gate at 116th Street. And there used to be a chock full of nuts there in 1976. It was absolutely beautiful. I mean, and Broadway was this wild, up in Morningside Heights. There was Tom's Diner, which of course was immortalized on television, and there was the Gold Rail, but it was just, it was kind of like parts of Brooklyn still are. And so chock full of nuts at 4 a.m. Everything's dark, there's no cars, but there's the light there, and you can almost hear the fluorescence of the light. And they're setting up for the day.
Yeah.
So he sees that, and he imagines he's at MoMA's looking at an Edward Hopper painting. And it's the idea of there being beauty hidden in the ordinary. And that then allows him to start to access memories he has. And he goes to the memories to try to find things to hold on to. There were sources of strength and of just pure impulse and creative energy. And so he shuttles between those memories, which are told in a fairly sequential way, shared in a fairly sequential way, and his observations of all the life around him in New York City. And that's the next 36 hours. And so I found that that structure, I still was asking that same question, how do you get well? In the second part, I figure there's 3 parts in the book, like a play construction. So the second act of the book was him finally sleeping and trying to finish his exams and finally going home and graduating with his class. And he has a respite of maybe a week or 2 where he has a very close affair with someone, and that allows him to finally let his defenses down and realize he's able to just confront that he's unraveled.
Yeah, he really turns a corner there.
And really, you have to come to a point in order to begin to solve these kinds of problems. You have to have some acceptance that it's happened and stop trying to just vanquish it in a day. So then the third act is him, how he solves it. It took me took me 5 years. And 4 of those years, I was in a hospital that I still feel grateful for. It was an extraordinary place. It was very modest. It was very simple. It was very strict. But it had been started by Harry Stack Sullivan, who was the first gay psychoanalyst and probably the most successful clinical psychiatrist in terms of working with people with psychiatric disorders. He wasn't public about his orientation, but he differed with Freud entirely. He wrote several really good books. I actually had read his book that year at Columbia, The Psychodynamic Theory, the Theory of Interpersonal Relations. It's 450 or 500 pages. Wonderful book. It's very, very I mean, he spent years practicing medicine and writing about his practice in very scientific detail. So he believed he believed that people had a genetic inheritance, and then they developed in many different ways the first 6 years of life. But in essence, in almost all cases, whatever they were was good. And that the root cause of psychiatric disorders was repression of people's natural instincts or impulses or personalities. And so he was ahead of his time.
Yeah,
and a lot of people didn't quite, very few people know who he is. He got confused with some cults, and but the thing about that hospital, he employed a woman named Frieda von Reichmann, who had been a psychiatrist in Europe and who had and was from an Orthodox Jewish background, fled the Holocaust, and brought a lot of her own experience into her work. She was the doctor of Joanne Greenberg, who wrote I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. And she was enormously successful working with the most, I would say, disassociated individuals. There was someone on my floor who was catatonic, who didn't move or speak for over a year, the first year I was living there. And the doctor just sat with her and sat with her, and within a couple years, she was talking. She moved back to New Jersey, and I got a notice of her. You know, it wasn't quite an invitation to her wedding, but it was a notice that she was getting married. This was back. You know, it's about 7 years later.
Wow.
So I saw that on my floor. Frida from Reichman wasn't her doctor, but she had other patients. She wasn't, I think when I was there, she had already, but she had an idea that she was able to see some of illnesses having to do with war and displacement and alienation, and terribly helpful. It could be terribly helpful now.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yes.
she was able to and so her work was based on being with the person and hearing their story and being with them and just bringing them gradually back. So those were the kinds of doctors that were there, and there was a staff that was extraordinary as well. And
we get to hear about them in the book, too. We
yeah,
get to hear about them in the
I
book.
could tell more about. I mean, I'm probably talking at length. I probably should.
People want to hear you,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
It's all good.
Well, I really. There were some staff members, and I think one of them might be here tonight, Paul Shapiro. I hope he's here, but he might not be. He lives in Baltimore. There was a group of staff there who were just extraordinary. They talked with me. They, you know, just to have a community of people to talk to, and a lot of this is this is just backstory, but when you read the book, you'll see a lot of what happened to me was the culmination of many years of not having intimacy.
Yeah.
I had this very, my father was critical and demanding. We never really could talk about anything. You know, I would come home for a holiday and I'd leave in a day. I mean, came for Thanksgiving, and Friday I was back on the train that year. So he was always under a lot of pressure professionally here in Washington, and but all that is the meat and potatoes of the book. But that I didn't have really intimacy with him, and you know, I had friends, but I would say, and I went to a school that was extraordinary in that so many of my friends reached out to me and were supportive after this happened. But you know, when you're in high school, it's a pretty competitive place, and you know.
And when you say intimacy, you mean emotional intimacy. That's what you're really talking about.
Yeah. That's the other thing. We talked earlier about this. I mean just emotion, having relationships where you can talk openly and you feel like people have your back, and you can, you know, you talk. I mean emotional, social intimacy.
Yes.
I actually think that word is one of those words that got redefined, perhaps, because sex has nothing to do with intimacy. In fact, sex is probably what people go to when they fail intimacy, or when they're threatened by intimacy, or when they, you know, are not really seeking a relationship, but some kind of power dynamic.
And we see this in the book with Sam, with his relationships with most of the men, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. You know, I just told a story, and as a writer, I just try to you try to just let your mind go and you tell a story. But I'm just sharing my backstory, my life story, that was what was missing. So I couldn't talk about some real traumatic things that I observed or ways I was feeling with anybody. And friends at school weren't. And then I had some intimacy with my uncle, but you know, I wanted to be. I didn't want to be a hanger-on. I didn't want to be independent, and you know, he had his own concerns, and it wasn't. There was a limit to how much communication we could have, or whether it would necessarily be helpful to me, given our circumstances. And there's a lot in the book about how helpful it is to be independent as well. But you need to have, when you're growing up, some kind of grounding in intimacy, and you need people you feel you can count on and go back to and share things with. That's what was missing for me. So the hospital provided that, and you know, it was a modest place. I have to say, it's the kind of treatment that has gone out of fashion for, I don't know why. I actually think people don't have patience, because they did this kind of treatment at a number of private hospitals. They used to do this kind of treatment at state hospitals. In fact, there's a New York State hospital in Queens where they had enormous success. By that I mean, you know, 30 to 40% remission for patients. And they had it's no longer there, it's no longer funded, but I saw this wonderful exhibit of art by people who'd been at this hospital, Queens State Hospital, at the Queens Museum of Art, maybe 15 years ago. And they have had some great artists and people who left there and took jobs as illustrators and taught art and you know, all kinds of things. So again, I bring that up as backstory, but part of what I feel like it's not my experience, the reason it says easy to slip as a title, is there are many people who were in or who are in my situation, and who could benefit. I don't feel that there was anything unique or special about it. In fact, I think I was just typical. But the problem is there's no longer really a cultural, you know, people aren't willing to take the time or put the funding in or have the patience with, or have the humility to think, well, if you end up with a problem, it didn't happen by accident, right? It might seem like an accident, but you know, as an example, if you get cancer of some kind, or some other, I can't think of any other similar illness, you go to a specialist. And if you fight like hell, you might be in 100% remission, right, when you're done. But you not only go to a specialist, they take time, and they don't just give you some medicine, and they don't just say, go tough it out, and the community will help you. A lot of time you get put through a whole therapeutic regimen, and it's the same kind of thing. It's the thing is, these psychiatric disorders are not. They're neurological, partly, and if you reorganize your thinking and reconnect your thinking and your feeling, that's how you achieve remission. it's not, there's no other way. And it certainly is something that, I think there's a lot of ideas and theories and confusion, and it would be nice if people could trust a lot of the good things in medicine,
Yeah.
in traditional medicine.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to go back to the
Sure.
hospital for a second because you were talking about there's a character, Evan, and just how important that was to
Yeah.
Sam actually, and that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could share a little bit about.
Yeah, he
about
just
that.
was, it just was helpful while I was seeing a therapist and while I was with other patients at a hospital, there was,
Oh, the mic.
to have someone I could just talk with, who was like a friend. And I will say there was a kind of a community of gay social workers there because of Harry Stack Sullivan. This was in 1975, 76. They couldn't have been more just supportive and friendly and down to earth. I fell in love with a girl there. They encouraged the relationship. They were just. I mean, there was no. It wasn't fraught with anything. It was, it was just. They were just trying to help me, my emotional, social self, become engaged and involved more. And and you have to understand, I had had a lot of good things in my life before this happened. Nonetheless, this kind of thing, it takes over. And there was a good 2 years there where I was locked on the ward. I couldn't, and I worked really hard to get the privilege to go to walk to the dining room, to have a meal, and that to me, still proud of it.
Yeah. I mean,
But that's the kind of rewiring you have to do, and it takes some humility. I also think I had a family that was willing to just, and I think there are a lot of. I mean, I met a lot of families like my family in Washington Heights, Dominican American families. Because I worked at a clinic there. I led a storytelling group. I did some one-on-one therapy. And it was largely, it was in a community, a neighborhood. Washington Heights was largely Dominican American. So a lot of the members.
Whippa.
Yeah.
I'm Dominican.
A lot of the members of that of that group and who came to the clinic, and this was in 2001. They would leave. They were in the clinic from 8 to 5, but they would go home. They'd have a nice home to go home to. They had a family that was willing to say, and my family was this way. They were willing to say, God, maybe we made some mistakes. Maybe we did some things wrong. We take responsibility, and we'll help you out. And I actually also had, I remember all the students, everyone I went to high school with, said, well, friends, was that way, and wrote me lots of letters. And even when I came home to graduate, by and large, not entirely, but there was a certain kind of I didn't feel distanced at all. I felt like I was that I think is kind of extraordinary.
Yes.
I wonder if our culture is still that way. I think it would be. It's just natural in human nature for it to be that way, and that was part of what Harry Stack Sullivan believed, was that everyone had these human capabilities, and the more we can support them, the better. The problems happen when they get repressed or put down, or
That's right.
and everyone has a capacity to repair and to be healthy. That's in the physiognomy. It's in the neurological. It's kind of like a back thing, where it's a terrible injury, but you keep working at it. It gets better and better and better, and it's probably not the right analogy, but so. I feel fortunate in that so.
When did you know that you were in full remission, or when did you realize?
Well, I
that
went
you were
back. I was at the hospital for 4 years, and then I went back to college, to first Montgomery College, then Catholic University, and when I was, I guess, in my sophomore year at Catholic University, and living in a group house with no heat, and in the middle of February, and we were boiling pans of pasta pots to get heat, and I was there, and I drive by it now when I drive my son to school. It's right there near the Yes food store. It's the same structure, but there were 4 of us in that group house, because I started there in January, and I think we all lasted about 6 weeks, and then we finally because the heat failed to. We had space. I had a space heater next to my bed, but boy, it was freezing. Now, I knew I did fine in school. I knew I was well, and I had, certain things you just. There's certain things that take time, and but I just kind of kept at it and kept it to myself. And it was okay. So I graduated. I loved Catholic U. I finished in 1985. I went to drama school.
I know, that's why, one of the reasons I'm here, because I'm a theater person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we started with 3-act structure. We want to open it up to the audience too, is that okay?
Yeah.
Do you all have any questions or anything that you want to ask? Because I still have some questions and thoughts too. Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, could you hold on a second to get because we want, thank you.
It's good to see you, Cal. I do have one question. How difficult was it exposing your own human frailties to the public through your book?
Amen.
Oh. Well,
Great question.
It wasn't difficult, because I had done a lot of other writing. And you have to understand, I've shared the backstory. But when you read the book is filled with adventures and excitement and humor, and only the last 65 pages take place in a hospital. So it's about my life. My life was actually pretty good. It was great. I'm grateful I've had my life. Totally grateful. I'm grateful I had my year at Columbia. So I don't view it as frailties. I view it as I'm sharing psychiatric illness.
Amen.
And also I view it as I'm sharing a family story that had, and here I'll say, there's a lot of meat and potatoes in the book we haven't talked about, and I read you some of the simpler sections, because there was parts for a woman and a man, but a dialogue that I wanted to read.
The mic.
A dialogue I wanted to read. But there's many, many more scenes of from everything from Baltimore in 1962 all the way through most of it through 1972 in Washington. So it's and then So there's a very rich family story. My parents and my uncle and aunt, and I was close to my uncle. I worked for him 2 summers, 1 summer for quite a while, and
There's some funny moments with that too in the
yeah.
book, actually.
So I have to say it's because I wanted to write a story. There was a interesting kind of picaresque coming of age story. I just happened to get an illness. That's just some backstory. I don't know. I shared that because it's kind of extraordinary, and I think there's some unusual elements of it that you never read about or hear about. We always hear the bad stories, and part of that is people don't talk about it. I didn't talk about this for years. I still don't talk about it. I wrote about it, but I don't talk about it. So the reason it was easy was I wrote an article about some work I did in a drama group at Lorton Penitentiary, the old Lorton Penitentiary, and the prologue takes place there. And I literally, drove down there on my own and walked in, and I was a member of the group. I was, there at the prison, and I walked into the warden's office. He wasn't even there. I mean, it was a different. Prisons were different. Hospitals were different. Everything was. It was a different time. Yeah. So I wrote that in 1982, and I never circulated it because I think I felt like it. I felt it would stigmatize me because I kept this to myself for years. But the reason I felt okay is I had worked on 2 film projects. One, Roger, based on your story. Yeah. And there's some scenes that take place in a maternity ward that are very close, personal to you, I know. But that was I think a fascinating story, and we of course had really good people involved, Kenny Leon and Harry Lennox, and yet because there was no violence or there were no genre elements, it was people wouldn't, people liked it, but they wouldn't finance it, as you recall. So I had that experience, and then I had the experience of working on another film project about a psychiatric resident at the clinic that I worked at. It was a fictional version of kind of what might have happened with me if I had been a psychiatric resident. I mean, it was a made-up story, but it was. So I brought in a lot of the issues about this to that, and I had with this story similar kind of thing. People didn't understand it because they had a lot of kind of stereotype notions of what mental illness is and what a doctor is and how these things should be. And but we had some wonderful actors and director involved again, and people kind of liked it, but they couldn't finance it because it was, and some people didn't actually understand it. I really felt a need to share this because I feel people can certainly understand it. I also know that we're in a period where it's hard to. You've had rising rates of psychiatric illnesses, and you have a terrible situation where people in low-income communities, all kinds of communities, but I would say there's a fair amount of attention to low-income, rural, white communities. But think of the issues and the problems kids are having in low-income communities of color now. with gangs, with violence, with schools in such bad shape. Poverty rates are going up. And so you have a lot of these same issues, and yet no one's really thinking in terms of here are kids who are a step away from having a good life, right? Yeah. No one's really addressing those issues. And as I read it in the New York Times, the rates of problems are going up. And of course, what's evolved in our country is there's no longer health care, there's for-profit prisons. And people can get thrown there for all kinds of things. They don't even, and the other part is, I'm still, whenever I think of Jordan Neely, you know, it's happened like what, less than a year ago. And here's this kid, really good dancer, he has an illness, he tries to get help for years and years and years and gets turned away. And he's a busker in Times Square and on the subway. And, you know, he had a bad afternoon, and, you know, I think we all know what happened. I think he was murdered. But the man who did that, of course, is now working at for Mark Andreessen. Those are the people who we set up as heroes in the new culture. And that man's father is suing. And in fact, when this happened, you had 5 or 6 city council people and congressmen up in arms about it, and they brought charges against Joe Penny. I think it's kind of a clear case, you know? I mean, Jordan Neely he wasn't a threat to anyone, really. He was having an episode of illness. So that happened less than a year ago. So I don't think my story is disconnected. I think my story is connected to that. I identify with Jordan Neely. You know, I'm a lot closer to him than whatever happened. So I just wish that there would be more of a cultural awareness of this, and so this stuff doesn't have to happen. Things like this happen we don't hear about because it doesn't happens. You know, that happened in New York City, but think of all the other cities and all the other communities, and so it's.
This is why your book is so important.
Yeah,
because I actually think that it's sharing a story, sharing something with everybody, and actually talking about something that people aren't talking about, right?
Yeah.
So let's give you a round of applause for doing this, for the courage, the vulnerability, the openness with everybody about your story, about this which I keep wanting to call a show. It's a novel. But thank you so much.
Thank you. You can purchase a book from one of our lovely booksellers. We will have the signing line starting right here. If you could just make a nice queue right along this back area, that'd be very helpful. Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You did great. Oh. Now you did it great. It's your John Hancock time.
Thank you so much. We'll get you seated back there. And if you wouldn't mind, the chairs are finicky, but if you wouldn't mind folding them up and putting them against a sturdy shelf, I am merely one person working tonight's event, so it'd be super helpful. Thanks.